Undercover CEO walks into his own restaurant and finds a waitress in tears. But what follows shows, what if one moment of kindness could change everything you thought you knew about success? David Harrison had constructed his restaurant empire from absolutely nothing, beginning with a humble little diner way back 40 years ago. Now, at 62 years young, he was the proud owner of 17 upscale establishments spread across 3 states. But on this particular evening, there was just something in the air that felt undeniably different as he made his way through the rain toward his flagship restaurant nestled in the heart of downtown Chicago. He wasn't sporting his usual tailored suit, the kind that screamed success, nor was he behind the wheel of his luxury car. Instead, he looked like any other ordinary customer, just trying to find a bit of shelter from the relentless storm outside. His gray hair was damp with rain, and his worn jacket seemed to whisper tales of everyday struggles and the common man. But what he was about to uncover inside those doors would shake him right down to his very core and serve as a powerful reminder of why he'd fallen head over heels for the restaurant business in the first place. You see, sometimes the most impactful and profound lessons in life come from the most unexpected and unassuming places, and tonight was undoubtedly going to be one of those pivotal nights that just changes absolutely everything. Where are you watching from tonight? David pushed through the gleaming glass doors of Harrison's Prime, the very restaurant that had ignited his journey to success and entrepreneurial glory. The warm, inviting lighting and the gentle, comforting hum of conversation initially welcomed him, but there was just something that felt subtly off-key. The usual vibrant energy seemed strangely strained, almost like a guitar string pulled just a little too tight, threatening to snap at any moment. He decided on the spur of the moment, impromptu visit after receiving some rather troubling customer complaints regarding the overall quality of service, and he desperately wanted to see things through the fresh eyes of a customer, just for once. The hostess barely glanced up from her phone as she mechanically grabbed a menu. "Just one?" she asked, with about as much enthusiasm as someone reading a mundane grocery list. David simply nodded, noticing how she seemed far more engrossed in her text messages than in making him feel genuinely welcome and valued. She led him to a small, somewhat undesirable table located uncomfortably close to the swinging kitchen doors, the kind of spot usually reserved for those customers they didn't expect to leave much of a generous tip. As he settled into his chair, David took a moment to quietly observe the dinner rush unfolding all around him. Servers expertly weaved between tables with practiced efficiency, but their smiles seemed forced and almost mechanical, lacking any genuine warmth. The laughter echoing from the dining room felt hollow, like actors simply playing their assigned parts without truly feeling the joy and passion of the performance. This was certainly not the warm, inviting, and family-like atmosphere that he'd worked so tirelessly to create when he first swung open these very doors. Then he saw her. A waitress, likely in her early 40s, stood quietly near the service station, her auburn hair pulled back in a neat ponytail that had definitely seen far better days. Her name tag read, Linda. And there was just something about the way she carried herself that immediately caught his attention and piqued his curiosity. While the other, much younger servers rushed past their tables with barely even a fleeting glance, Linda made a point of pausing at each one, genuinely listening to her customers' needs and concerns, refilling water glasses before they were even empty, and somehow managing to make each and every person feel like they truly mattered. But David noticed something else, too. The subtle way the younger servers whispered amongst themselves when she walked by, how they'd roll their eyes ever so slightly when she graciously offered to lend a hand with their overflowing tables. Linda carried herself with a quiet, almost regal dignity, but David could clearly see the invisible weight she carried in her shoulders, the sheer burden of life's challenges etched into her posture. The way her smile flickered just slightly when she thought that nobody was looking, revealing a hint of the pain she kept carefully hidden beneath the surface. The evening crowd was particularly demanding and unforgiving tonight. A high-powered businessman at table 12 snapped his fingers impatiently, demanding immediate service. A young couple complained loudly and obnoxiously about their appetizer, finding fault with every little detail. And an elderly woman seemed absolutely determined to send her soup back for a third time, each complaint more ridiculous than the last. Through it all, Linda moved with effortless grace, handling each difficult situation with a remarkable level of patience that seemed to emanate from somewhere deep within her very soul. David ordered a simple, unassuming chicken dinner, nothing fancy or extravagant. He simply wanted to observe, to take it all in without drawing any unnecessary attention to himself. As he patiently waited for his meal to arrive, he watched Linda expertly juggle 6 demanding tables with a kind of skill that only comes from years and years of dedicated experience. She remembered that the distinguished man at table 8 preferred his coffee black, without any cream or sugar. She recalled that the lovely woman at table 4 was celebrating a very special anniversary with her beloved husband. And she knew that the nervous teenager at table 6 was agonizing over paying for his very first real date, wanting to make a good impression. But then, David witnessed something that made his chest tighten, with a mixture of sadness and concern. Linda had just finished serving a particularly difficult and rude table when she quietly slipped into the small alcove nestled between the bustling kitchen and the lively dining room. And for just a fleeting moment, when she believed that no one could possibly see her, her carefully constructed composure completely cracked. Her hands visibly shook as she wiped away her tears, and David realized with a shock that this incredibly dedicated and hard-working employee was quietly crying, overwhelmed by the sheer pressure of it all. David's food finally arrived, brought to him by a different server who barely even acknowledged his presence. His undivided attention, however, remained firmly fixed on Linda, who had quickly regained her composure and returned to her demanding tables with that same gentle and reassuring smile. But now, he could see what he'd somehow missed before: the slight tremor in her tired hands, the way she took slow, deliberate, and deep breaths between orders, the careful and almost reverent way she counted her hard-earned tips, as if every single dollar truly mattered, making a tangible difference in her life. As the evening slowly progressed, David began to piece together Linda's story through his careful and observant nature. He watched her handle a spilled drink with incredible patience and understanding, even as the irate customer berated her for ruining his expensive designer shirt. She apologized sincerely, genuinely offered to pay for the dry cleaning, and somehow managed to transform his initial anger into a grudging sense of respect. When a young family with rambunctious children struggled to keep their restless toddler quiet, Linda didn't just robotically take their order like the other servers. She went above and beyond, bringing crayons from behind the counter and spending a few extra precious moments making silly, funny faces that had the little boy giggling with unadulterated delight. "Excuse me, miss," David called softly when Linda happened to pass his out-of-the-way table. She turned with that practiced and professional smile, but up close, he could clearly see the unmistakable exhaustion in her weary eyes, the kind of profound weariness that comes from carrying far more than your fair share of the world's burdens. "Yes, sir? Is everything okay with your dinner?" "Everything's wonderful," David said gently, offering her a reassuring smile. "I was just wondering, you seem to really care about this place. How long have you worked here?" For just a brief moment, something truly authentic and real flickered across Linda's tired face. 8 years next month," she said, and there was an undeniable sense of pride evident in her voice, despite all the challenges and hardships she'd clearly faced. "I started right after my husband passed away unexpectedly. Mr. Harrison gave me a chance when nobody else would even consider hiring a 40-year-old woman with absolutely no prior restaurant experience." David felt something twist uncomfortably in his chest, a sharp pang of guilt and regret. He vaguely remembered that hiring decision, but he'd never bothered to follow up to see how it had all turned out, to see if his act of kindness had actually made a real difference in someone's life. "That must have been incredibly difficult, starting over like that," David said softly, genuinely wanting to understand her struggles. Linda's smile became noticeably more genuine, less forced. "It was scary, I won't lie," she admitted with a hint of vulnerability. "But this job saved us, it truly did. My daughter was only 10 years old back then, and I desperately needed something stable, something reliable. The people here became like family, you know? Even when times get tough, we always have each other's backs." Before David could respond, the manager, a sharp-faced and overly ambitious young man named Craig, suddenly appeared at their table, interrupting their heartfelt conversation. "Linda, you're needed in the kitchen. There's an issue with Table 9's order, and they're getting impatient. His tone was curt and dismissive, completely lacking in basic human decency, and David didn't miss the way Linda's shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly at his abrasive words. "Of course," Linda said quickly, her voice filled with a hint of apology. "I'm so sorry, sir. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening." As she hurried away to attend to her managerial duties, David found himself studying Craig with a newfound and critical eye. Throughout the course of the evening, he watched as the manager treated his hard-working staff like interchangeable parts, mere cogs in a machine, rather than as valued human beings with feelings and aspirations. He saw Craig publicly embarrass a young, inexperienced server over a minor and easily fixable mistake, unnecessarily humiliating him in front of his peers and customers. He watched him roll his eyes dismissively when Linda gently suggested that they comp a free dessert for a loyal customer who was celebrating a milestone birthday. And he noticed how Craig seemed far more concerned with aggressively cutting corners and maximizing profits than with creating the kind of warm, welcoming, and unforgettable dining experience that David had always envisioned as the very heart and soul of his beloved restaurant. But the breaking point, the moment that truly pushed David over the edge, came dangerously close to closing time. David saw Linda approach Craig with what appeared to be a scheduling conflict, speaking to him in a quiet and incredibly respectful tone. But Craig's response was loud and unnecessarily harsh, easily audible to several nearby tables of stunned customers. "If you can't handle the hours, maybe you should just find another job. There are plenty of other people out there who would be absolutely grateful for your position." Linda's face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and anger, but she simply nodded silently and walked away, refusing to engage in a public confrontation. That's when David saw her duck back into that same secluded alcove, seeking refuge from the relentless pressures of her job. And this time, the tears weren't quick to stop. They flowed freely down her cheeks, a testament to the deep emotional pain she was enduring. David simply couldn't sit still any longer, passively observing the injustice unfolding before his very eyes. Something was fundamentally wrong with the very foundation of the place he'd built from the ground up, and it went far deeper than mere complaints about poor service. He waited patiently until Linda finally emerged from her brief moment of privacy, allowing her to regain her composure, and then caught her attention as she passed by his table once more. "Miss, could I possibly speak with you for just a moment? I promise I'm not complaining about anything," David said gently, hoping to ease her apprehension. Linda hesitated, glancing nervously in the direction of where Craig was meticulously counting down the cash register, ever watchful and critical. "I'm so sorry, sir, but we're closing soon, and I still have a lot of tables to clean before I can leave for the night." "Please," David said, his voice filled with genuine sincerity and concern. "Just 1 minute. I'm a business owner myself, and I genuinely believe that you could help me understand something that's been troubling me." Something in his calm and reassuring tone must have finally convinced her, because Linda reluctantly sat down across from him, her calloused hands folded carefully in her lap, betraying a lifetime of hard work and dedication. Up close, David could clearly see the calluses and scars on her hard-working fingers, the way her worn uniform had been mended at the seam to prolong its life, the profound weariness that went bone-deep, radiating from her very core. "You mentioned that you have a daughter," David began softly, gently broaching the sensitive topic. "She must be in high school now, is that right?" Linda's tired face brightened perceptibly, a flicker of genuine joy illuminating her features. "She's a senior, honor roll, and she wants to study nursing in college. She's absolutely everything to me." Then, her fleeting smile faded, and her expression clouded over with worry and concern. "But college is incredibly expensive, and with my hours being drastically cut, I just don't know how we're going to make it work." She stopped abruptly, looking visibly embarrassed and ashamed. "I'm so sorry, you really don't need to hear all about my problems." "Cut hours?" David asked, though he strongly suspected that he already knew the answer, the pieces of the puzzle slowly falling into place. Linda looked around nervously, ensuring that they couldn't be overheard, then leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice to a near whisper. "The new management philosophy, they call it." Fewer full-time employees means significantly lower benefit costs for the company. I used to work a solid 40 hours a week, but now I'm lucky if I even get 25. And they've hired 3 part-time servers to replace the 2 of us who were full-time. Her voice dropped even further, barely audible. I've been desperately searching for a second job, but nothing pays enough to even come close to making up the difference. David felt a surge of righteous anger building in his chest, but he consciously forced himself to remain calm and composed, knowing that he needed to hear her story fully before he could take any decisive action. That must be incredibly stressful, constantly worrying about finances. I love this job, Linda continued, her voice filled with a desperate plea that she was struggling to conceal. I genuinely love making people feel welcome, being a small part of their celebrations, helping families create a memorable and enjoyable night out. But I honestly don't know how much longer I can possibly make it work. My daughter's college applications are due next month, and I promised her that I'd somehow find a way to help with her tuition, to make her dreams a reality. David watched this remarkable woman, who had dedicated 8 long years of her life to his restaurant, who treated every single customer like a cherished member of her own family, who had been quietly holding everything together with unwavering strength and resilience, while his short-sighted manager systematically dismantled the very culture of warmth and genuine hospitality that David thought he'd painstakingly built. He saw her furtively count her meager tips yet again, her lips moving silently as she desperately calculated whether she'd even have enough money to buy groceries for the week. Have you ever talked to the owner about these concerns? David asked carefully, choosing his words with precision. Linda let out a soft, bitter laugh, laced with resignation. Mr. Harrison? Oh, I've never even seen him. Craig says he's far too busy with his other restaurants to worry about individual employees and their petty problems. Besides, she added, her voice tinged with sadness, what would someone like him possibly understand about trying to raise a daughter all on your own on a measly waitress salary? The weight of her words hit David like a physical blow, a sharp and painful reminder of his own failings. Here was someone who had remained fiercely loyal to his original vision for 8 long years, and she genuinely believed that he didn't even care enough to acknowledge her existence, to know that she was struggling. Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. At that precise moment, Craig abruptly appeared beside their table, his face contorted with a thunderous expression of barely concealed anger. Linda, what on earth are you doing? You have side work to finish before you can leave for the night, and I'm certainly not paying you to sit around and chat with customers. David felt something deep inside him shift, like a dam finally breaking after years of mounting pressure. He stood up slowly, his imposing height suddenly making Craig take a startled step back in surprise. Actually, David said, his voice carrying a quiet but unmistakable authority that caused the few remaining staff members to stop what they were doing and turn their heads in stunned silence. I'd very much like to know more about this new management philosophy that you mentioned. Craig looked visibly confused, then increasingly irritated by this unexpected turn of events. Sir, we're closed. You need to settle your bill and be on your way. My name is David Harrison, he said simply, and watched with grim satisfaction as the color completely drained from Craig's face, replaced by a look of sheer terror. And I own this restaurant. The silence that followed was absolutely deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the remaining kitchen appliances. Linda's eyes went wide with disbelief, her trembling hand flying up to cover her gaping mouth. Around them, the few remaining staff members abandoned all pretense of working and stared openly, their expressions a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. Mr. Harrison? Craig stammered, his earlier arrogance and condescending demeanor completely evaporating in the face of this unexpected revelation. I had absolutely no idea. I mean, if I'd known you were coming. That's precisely the point, Craig, David interrupted, his unwavering gaze never leaving the manager's terrified face. You had no idea I was here, so I got to witness firsthand how you really run my restaurant, how you truly treat the people who are the very heart and soul of this business. He turned to Linda, whose face had now gone completely pale with a mixture of shock and disbelief. 8 years ago, I hired a woman who desperately needed a fresh start in life. I remember now, you came in wearing your best dress, visibly nervous but incredibly determined. And you told me that you'd work harder than anyone else if I would just give you a chance to prove yourself. Linda nodded wordlessly, tears beginning to flow freely down her cheeks once more. This time tears of relief and vindication. I kept that promise to work hard, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Every single day, I gave it my all. I know you did, Linda, David said gently, his voice filled with genuine remorse. And I failed to keep my promise to you. I promised that you'd be part of a family here, that you'd be valued and respected for your hard work and dedication. Instead, I became so obsessed with building a vast and impersonal empire that I completely forgot why I started this whole thing in the first place. He faced Craig once again, whose face had now shifted from pale white to a deep shade of crimson red, a clear indication of his simmering anger and resentment. Cutting hours to avoid paying benefits, treating loyal and hardworking employees like disposable resources, creating an atmosphere where someone like Linda, who represents absolutely everything good about the true spirit of hospitality, feels invisible and completely undervalued. Sir, the quarterly reports clearly show increased efficiency and cost savings. Craig began, attempting to defend his questionable business practices. The quarterly reports don't show Linda staying late to comfort a grieving customer who just tragically lost their spouse. David interrupted, his voice rising with righteous indignation. They don't show her using her own hard-earned money to buy crayons for bored and restless children, or remembering that Mrs. Peterson likes extra whipped cream on her apple pie because it reminds her of her late husband's favorite dessert. David pulled out his cell phone and swiftly made a call, his voice firm and decisive. Patricia, it's David. I need you to process a termination, effective immediately, and prepare a comprehensive management transition plan for Harrison's Prime. He glanced pointedly at Craig. You can clear out your office tonight. Security will escort you from the building. Then, he sat back down across from Linda, who was still staring at him in utter shock and disbelief, unable to fully comprehend the dramatic turn of events. I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. If you could change absolutely anything about this restaurant, what would it be? Linda looked around at her attentive coworkers, who were listening with rapt attention, hanging on every single word. I honestly don't even know what to say. Start with what made you love working here in the very beginning, David encouraged, offering her a reassuring smile. What's changed since then? If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales of hope and redemption. And slowly, tentatively, Linda began to speak, not just about the mundane details of schedules and policies, but about the very soul of genuine hospitality that had been slowly and quietly dying within his restaurant, suffocated by corporate greed and mismanagement. 3 months later, David stood in the very same spot where he'd first witnessed Linda crying, overwhelmed and heartbroken. But everything had changed, transformed almost beyond recognition. The restaurant now hummed with a completely different kind of energy, a palpable sense of genuine warmth and camaraderie that simply couldn't be faked or mandated from some distant corporate headquarters. Linda approached him with a radiant smile that reached all the way to her sparkling eyes, no longer the tired, careful, and guarded expression he remembered so vividly from that fateful night. She proudly wore a brand new name tag that read, Linda, Assistant Manager, and carried herself with a newfound sense of confidence and self-assurance that had been hidden for far too long. The new training program is working beautifully, she reported enthusiastically, her voice brimming with joy and optimism. The staff retention rate has improved by an astounding 60%, and customer satisfaction scores are the highest they've been in over 3 years. David nodded approvingly, feeling a swell of pride in his chest. But what pleased him most wasn't the impressive numbers or the positive statistics. It was seeing Linda's bright and talented daughter, Jessica, working part-time as a hostess, greeting each and every customer with the same genuine warmth and heartfelt kindness that her mother had always shown. The girl was diligently saving her hard-earned money for nursing school, pursuing her lifelong dream, but even more importantly, She was learning the invaluable lesson of treating every single person who walked through those doors with unwavering dignity, compassion, and respect. "Tell me about the scholarship program," David said, already knowing all the intricate details by heart. Linda's face lit up with pure joy and gratitude. "We've already helped 5 employees' children with much-needed tuition assistance, and the community response has been absolutely incredible. When people see that you genuinely care about your workers' families and their well-being, they instinctively want to support your business." She paused for a moment, then added more quietly, her voice filled with emotion. "I honestly never thought that I'd ever be in a position to help other families the way you so selflessly helped mine. But now, thanks to Jessica's full scholarship, I can finally pay it forward and make a real difference in someone else's life." David smiled warmly, remembering the day he'd personally called the nursing school to establish the Employee Family Scholarship Fund, a gesture that had come straight from his heart. It had taken just one simple phone call, but Linda's tears of overwhelming gratitude that day had been worth far more than any impressive quarterly profit report. The evening dinner rush was just beginning to pick up steam, and David watched with immense satisfaction as his dedicated staff worked together in perfect synchronization, a testament to their newfound sense of mutual respect and camaraderie, rather than working out of fear and intimidation. New, inexperienced employees were carefully mentored by seasoned veterans like Linda, who taught them that the true essence of hospitality wasn't just about speed and efficiency. It was about making each and every person feel genuinely valued, appreciated, and cared for. "You know, Linda," David said softly, his voice filled with sincerity, "I used to think that success simply meant keeping your head down, working hard, and surviving each day, just barely making ends meet. But working with you these past few months has taught me that true success is when everyone around you rises along with you, achieving their full potential." David felt his throat tighten with emotion, overcome by a wave of gratitude and humility. "You taught me something incredibly valuable, too, Linda. I'd completely forgotten that the cold, hard numbers on a balance sheet don't actually mean anything if you lose the human connection that makes it all worthwhile, the empathy and compassion that bind us together." As the evening gracefully progressed, David made his usual rounds, as he now did every week, not as the intimidating and unapproachable CEO checking up on his investment, but as a caring and compassionate leader who genuinely valued each and every person who made his vision a reality. He listened attentively to their concerns, celebrated their small victories and personal milestones, and made absolutely sure that no one would ever again feel invisible, undervalued, or unappreciated in his restaurants. When he finally left that night, David looked back at the warm, inviting glow spilling from the windows of Harrison's Prime, a beacon of hope and hospitality. Inside, Linda was patiently training a new server, carefully explaining that the real secret to providing great service wasn't about speed or robotic efficiency. It was about remembering that every single customer was someone's beloved parent, spouse, or child, and therefore deserving of the utmost kindness, dignity, and respect. Sometimes, the most powerful and transformative changes in our lives come from simply remembering to see the humanity in the people all around us, to recognize their inherent worth and value. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like this video, leave a thoughtful comment with your feedback and insights, and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales of hope, resilience, and redemption. Thank you for joining Linda and David on this inspiring journey of rediscovering what truly matters most, both in the world of business and in the grand tapestry of life itself.